Welcome everyone to the Community Commons Impact Makers session. I'm Rhonda Bannard and I'm founder and executive director of Earth Gives, and we exist to catalyze environmental philanthropy and build a community of Earth givers. And we're starting with a giving day that's focused on the single issue of climate and climate justice and environmental stewardship. So we're thrilled to be able to bring Brian Gawor here, the Giving Geek, to present his amazing tips on fundraising. And if this conversation is anything like our conversations, you're going to have to take notes very fast. So I'm going to go turn it over to Brian to make the most of our time here. Yet I have some big news to share. And as a former television journalist, this is a big tease. I'm going to share it at the end of the session. So stick around and hear a little bit about that. But for now, here's Brian.
Thanks, Rhonda. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. Of the causes that you're involved in are very close to my own heart as well, too. I have 2 children and I want them to have Earth they can actually live in. We got work to do. You all know that. So thanks for being here. I appreciate your hard work. Like Rhonda said, I'm Brian Gawor, CFRE, known as the Giving Geek. It's actually on my license plate. It says Giving Geek. About 10 years ago, I joined RNL. We're a platform and people-driven company that works with over 1,800 charitable institutions, vast majority of them higher education. That's our history. I also have do work outside of RNL as well too. Present a lot at conferences, but really I'm just paid to spend all day thinking about, talking about, and listening to donors. So what I want to do today is just talk with you a little bit about what might be going on in your donors' heads. Four types of giving. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cram a couple million pages of donor research into about 20 minutes, as Rhonda warned you. But really the goal here is to get us to think a little bit about where our donors are at in terms of their giving patterns. And then what I'm going to talk with you about is applying the right behavioral incentives to the right types of donors. Okay, so if you have questions about how we know a certain thing or where research comes from, so I can certainly send follow-up materials and things like that, but feel free to ask questions in the chat anytime. We've already got started with the description of our donors, talking about how much they give versus what's going on in their heads. I love that chat. So please encourage you to ask questions. Nothing is too weird, and you can ask any fundraising question you want. If I don't know the answer, I will either tell you the answer because I know it. I will tell you that I will find it, or I will tell you that there is no answer and here's how we can figure it out. The vast majority of things that are out there in the world about fundraising are totally made up. They're not based on data. So that's a good intro to you. And we generally do things out of tradition or what we think is right. Our instincts are often good, but in a lot of cases, we're not listening to donors. So let's kind of jump here and just talk a little bit about what I mean by 4 types of giving. Okay, the first type of giving I want to talk with you about is transaction giving. Probably the best example of transaction giving is checkout giving at the grocery store. Over $400 million last year in checkout giving. You know, people who round up, who tack on a little bit here and there. It could also be just the $20 that your colleague gives you when there's a run that your charity is running. It could be, sometimes we see this in higher education, or a senior gift campaign. Oh, quit bugging me, I'll give you $1 so I can be counted in the campaign. But these are quick decisions made by people. And the important thing to recognize is that in transaction-based giving, for the most part, people don't have a deep knowledge or understanding of the cause or the impact of the organization. They are often just giving because they're bugged. And a lot of our first-time givers are in this range. Now, keep in mind, you might also have transactional giving at a very high amount. When you find somebody who is a potential major donor and they're giving you a transactional gift, you're probably under-asked. If they can make the decision super quickly, then there's probably an opportunity for more. Or that individual is used to giving, nominal the gifts to charity and then seeing how it goes and then building up from there. And my friend Lisa Greer, who wrote Philanthropy Revolution, actually talked about that in the book. That there are some donors who just kind of test you out. The second type of giving is relationship-based giving, and these are often people who have given before. They don't have to be repeat givers. Sometimes they're There are people who have a relationship because a volunteer asked them, and there's a little bit of a, again, relationship there. These are people who maybe give through a network. So I would say that people who are connected to Earth Gives, and then when your organization is listed there, they may be as connected to Earth Gives as they are to your organization. That's a relationship based. There's a little bit of a more sticky social component to these relationship-based givers. These are the givers that, by the way, probably know a little bit more about what you're doing and what the impact is. So these are the individuals who probably could tell somebody what the mission of the organization is. And again, there's a little bit more of a social component. I want to ask you if any of you have any donors, and you don't have to answer this, but it's a rhetorical question, that call you and say, oh my God, did I get my gift in this year? So there's people who have actually shifted over to saying, oh my God, I would never not give to the annual campaign. Did my gift go through? Did I remember to do it? Can you help me out? So these are the people who have really bought into giving to your cause or to your organization or to your charity as part of their lifestyle. So we see this in some cases with recurring donors, people who have signed up to give monthly. You know, it really is part of their lifestyle to give, right? So they're multi-year givers. These are often our leadership donors. These are, in some cases, our board members who have stepped up. These are also people who might serve as a volunteer, and additionally, people who go as far as to attend an event. So that individual that's taking the time to go and on a hike and be part of the organization's events or things like that, absolutely are in that lifestyle phase. And the final type of giving that we're going to talk about is transformation. So these are the givers who really have said, okay, I'm going to get into wealth distribution. I'm going to put you in my will. It might also be an individual at a corporation that is directing the resources of that corporation, which are scarce. Their social capital is scarce, but directing a significant transformative gift. Okay, so that's where we want to be in terms of the permanent funding or transformational funding of our organizations. But it's important to recognize that rarely do we see that transformation-based giving without seeing at least these three other types first. Okay, so at least one or two, or maybe all three of them. And generally speaking, it tends to be a path. People get hooked. A friend bugs them, they make a fairly transactional gift. They learn because hopefully you steward them. You've asked them again, you've maybe talked to them personally, so they build a relationship, and then they eventually buy in and kind of adopt the cause, and it becomes part of their lifestyle. Okay, so generally speaking, donors are going to move along this continuum. Even when you stumble upon a major gift, you probably actually didn't stumble on it. That individual may have been in a stealth mode involved with the organization, or hearing about it from a friend or family member, you know, over time. So they probably are doing some of these previous things before they make the major gift. The other thing to recognize is that particularly at the front end of this donor giving continuum, people can move back and forth between transaction and relationship. Okay, so they might actually shift right back to, okay, just quit bugging me, I'll give you a gift. Of course, want to then try to, you know, thank them and build them back and move them forward. What I'm going to tell you is that for the most part, charities miss by providing the wrong behavioral incentive to the wrong type of giving. So often when we really want people to give that have never given before, we're going to pitch them. We're going to write a case for support. We're going to try to convince them to give, when what we probably should do is just make it easy to give. Okay. So for the most part in today's world, because people have the ability to research what's going on in the world, in this case, and particularly in the environmental justice vertical, people know a lot before they give. We can make the mistake of really over explaining, when then, and I did look at a number of the organizations who are signed up, and I can report that some of you have giving pages that are just a little bit hard to use. So what you want to do at the transactional stage is to provide options for people so they can identify their key passions. You want to make it easy and just reduce that friction. And this is also the opportunity to emphasize urgency. And we have a couple of ways in a giving day that Earth Gives can help you with. Is a primary example. And what we call that is manufactured urgency. Because actually, the environment is in trouble every day. The fact that you're holding a specific day is just manufacturing urgency so that people will get off the fence and get into your donor pool, right? We're manufacturing urgency. And that's at the transactional stage, what you really want to do. Then, as you start to engage with the donors more, you want to start to really think about sharing the impact of what your organization does, hopefully in a very data-driven way. This is how many more salmon we expect to be in the world as a result of stopping this mining, et cetera. Thinking a little bit about both win and loss framing. So if you haven't looked into this in terms of marketing or psychology, win framing is, with your support, we can accomplish the following. Loss framing is, if you do not give, this will happen. And there's a lot of research that indicates that different people are motivated by different framing. Probably the number one example of loss framing in the history of charities is Save the Children, right? They show, in some cases, quite disturbing images of young people in Africa, for example, that don't have food. And so that's loss framing. If I don't give, this kid's going to starve. This can get controversial. People talk about this. What I would say is, be really careful with loss framing, because there's a lot of evidence to suggest, particularly as you get into the transformation, that it is really win framing that will matter, but you want to mix it up a little bit. Most of the research that I've shown is that to a statistically significant but fairly slight degree, men seem to be a little bit more motivated by win framing, and women seem to be a little bit more motivated by loss framing. That is a consistent pattern in research. It's not huge. You wouldn't necessarily want to, base a solicitation strategy on it. I would just say, really think about making sure that you're doing both in your communications, maybe even in the same piece. Yeah, the other thing that we get to here with volunteers that have just begun volunteering, we really want to help volunteers just do the job easily. So somebody who volunteers is moving into the relationship stage of giving and contribution. But at this stage, we really shouldn't expect them to take initiative. So a common mistake that I've seen charities do is say on a giving day, they'll say, okay, everybody help promote the giving day. What you really should do is, here's a tweet, edit it a little bit and send it out, literally cut and paste. Make it as easy as possible. So that we call that volunteer facilitation, because these individuals are not yet at the psychology or the level of psychological investment where they're going to be able to take initiative. Now that changes at the lifestyle stage. So we've made it easy to give in the transaction stage. We started to share our impact and build a relationship and tell the donor story. You've given for X number of years. Thank you for your gift last year, right? All that. Now we move into lifestyle. And this is where we shift a little bit and we start to say, because you have given a certain number of years, or because you're a volunteer, or because you're at the leadership level, you're going to start to get some elite recognition and VIP access. I don't know how many of you do this, but a real easy way to promote lifestyle-based giving is for those individuals who pass some threshold, say it's a $500 gift, say it's 3 years in a row, whatever you want to use, that newsletter that you send out, send it to them a few days early. Slap a header across of it, calling it the leadership, whatever words you use for your societies, but send them that early. Just segment your list into 2 groups and do that. It doesn't really cost that much more to do that. Really helps out. Those individuals then will, especially if they're part of a community of people who are engaged in these issues, they might say something like, oh, did you hear what the charity, or do you hear what Earth Gives is doing? Oh, I didn't hear about that yet. Oh, you know what? They send it to me early because I'm a leadership donor. Harnessing the number one behavioral incentive for millennials and Gen Z, FOMO. Okay, so I'm Gen X. I have JOMO. I have joy of missing out. Young people apparently don't like to be left out of things. I like to be left out of things because I'm a cynical Gen Xer, but FOMO is huge. And you can manufacture FOMO by just choosing an elite group and letting them in on things a little bit earlier. They'll share with their friends, they'll post on social media. And it's really cool because then you'll start to see people say, oh, I want to get in on that. Okay. This is, by the way, at the lifestyle level where you start to use an assumptive level narrative. We know that right? You are part of the inner circle, all that stuff. And with volunteers, you start to move into the volunteer engagement model. So in the relationship stage, you're focused on letting the volunteers do their job easier and see who actually does it. when people move into that lifestyle phase, you want to start asking them, what ideas do you have about how we can engage other donors? Do you want to run an event? Do you want to, craft this letter with me, right? A lot of times in these first three areas, as fundraisers, we miss. So we miss on messaging, or we miss on where people are at because we're not listening to really where the donors are at. And then what's really interesting at the transformation stage, and I got to be careful not to nerd out too much on this, but the number one thing that you have to do in terms of raising big money is to listen. And seriously, just listen. Find the passion, link it to your needs, ask the donor if they're ready to make a transformative commitment, and then shut the heck up. So gift officer training will tell you that you ask a key question about someone's interest in contributing, what their passions are, and then you don't say anything at all. If you fill the empty space as a fundraiser, you're doing two things. You're probably not hearing what you could hear if the person pauses for a moment and actually can think of the answer. You're also taking away the key thing that we're talking about here, which is moving people from an extrinsic motivation. I should do this because the kettlebell is ringing. I should do this because, this person's bugging me, to an intrinsic motivation, which is to say, I have deep value for this cause. I am personally going to take action. I'm going to put and in the environmental movement, we have a long history of people putting their bodies at risk to stop some of these horrible things that are done. That's that intrinsic motivation. If we don't bring donors along that path, we're not going to see as many transformative gifts. Okay. So I put up 4 images here on the screen, the 4 things you ought to do. Number 1, at the transactional stage, just make it easy. Grease the wheels, so to speak. On the relationship stage, make it social. Tell their story, make them part of a community. At the lifestyle stage, it's really about elite access and the VIP. How can we make you part of the advanced community here? And then at the transformation stage, you just letting them fly, facilitating their transformation. And at the transformation stage is really interesting. I had the word symbolic immortality up there for a second, and that's Russell James. He's a researcher out of Texas Tech, a really cool guy. You can get most of his stuff for free on the internet. He actually put major donors, plan giving donors and major donors in an fMRI and asked them questions about their lives and about giving to charity and business and their kids and things like that. And he found that when he asked people about leaving legacy gifts, the areas that were activating in their brains were the same areas that were activated when they contemplated their own mortality. And that when donors who are talking about transformational gifts their brains are working, what's happening is they're actually moving from a third person internal, literally biological narrative with their brains working to a first person narrative. And that's what we're talking about here, moving donors away from the pitch, moving them away. All that stuff's important, right? You want to have your volunteers bug people for money and get them in the pipeline, right? But we really want to eventually empower donors to tell their own story. And that's kind of how it works. So those are the 4 things. That's what I told Rhonda I would focus on. I can share some examples. We can pause for questions. Rhonda, if you have any questions, did anything come in? You want me to share
Nothing
examples?
came in, but
Okay.
I invite people to either come off mic or put it in the chat. We're totally here for you. Julian?
Oh yeah, thanks a lot, Brian. I kind of missed part of it because I wasn't focusing, but what was the part about the man like win, or I couldn't remember exactly.
So most research indicates that women can be more motivated. Now, you got to be really careful when we say this type of person does this. Okay,
right?
Just flat out, you all should understand my politics. I'm very, very blue and very, very liberal, and I believe in engaging inclusive and purposeful donor base. Having said that, there do seem to be some gender differences. So if you only stick with win framing, hey, if you give us money, we can accomplish this, you're losing out on some people. More often, it's been shown for decades, women will be more likely to respond to loss framing. This is done often in hunger issues, work with children as well too. Now, The difference is not massive. Okay. But the point I was trying to make is if you only stick to one type of narrative, you're going to be missing some people. And you can feel out in your donor base win framing versus loss framing. But what I tell people is really in every appeal that you do, try to mix it up just a little bit. I would generally speaking in 2023 focus more on win framing. And that's in part because the acrimonious nature of our political situation right now is a little bit grating on people. And I think people are looking to charity and philanthropy for a positive. So I would generally continue to focus on win framing. I have argued with people at major hunger charities about their depiction of people in other countries who don't look like me. I'm not super happy. I don't like flies being on little kids and stuff like that. That's I don't think that that's the right way. That's not empowering to the people who are the recipients of our charity. But what I can tell you is that it very much works. So yeah, I can have my opinions about it, but I gotta tell you, Julian, if you show some dead salmon, you're going to get some gifts. You know, we got to be honest about that.
Because we do a youth program. It's like I said, it's tribal. With the Lapway Elementary School, we do a weekly youth program. Like we're carving canoes and paddles, and we have about 30 kids come there, and people really like that. I'm not only getting into the gender, but I know
yeah, but what I would say is that's a huge win framing, right? Seeing the actual activity of those kids doing that. Here's your loss framing. Do you have kids that can't come because they can't afford it? Yeah, I mean, quantify that. You know, we have heard from people saying that they can't come because they can't afford to do this, or we need to give them a grant because they can't afford to do it because they're a breadwinner for the family. We have many teens, and in your community, I know this is common as well too. We have many people who are literally supporting the family, as I did, given my status in my upbringing. And so I was helping pay the mortgage. You know.
Yeah, that's because I was just thinking too. That's a good. I mean, we started 2015. I've been kind of the sole employee. Then we have we hired now three other staff that help with the maintenance of the site. And then we have an office in Moscow. I don't know if you've ever been out here. It's Moscow, Idaho.
Okay.
Where I live in Pullman is across the border. And so we've been able to do a lot more stuff. And then we get, like, I've written about probably gotten about $1 million in grants and foundations. And now it's pretty cool because people are calling me and saying they heard about the group. You know, I mean, like I told them before when we were first starting, it was like, oh man, can I get $5,000 from you? You know, it's kind of like, you know, we got hooked up with some really groups. And then, but we do have some people that contribute, but that's what I'm saying. We never really, because like one person, I think she was from back east, New York or something. She just sent us $5,000, and you know, I have no idea how she found out about us, and but I think that's a good where I have a person now, Maria. She works in our office where we can kind of develop that connection to where, you know, even like you're saying, I like that about even the donors because I appreciate whether it's $10 a month, $20 a month. You know, I tell them I appreciate it. I don't care if you're giving, you know, 5,000. But it's kind of like that's what I want to start doing is kind of cultivating those relationships just to show them that we appreciate them. You know, I'll post on Facebook, thanks to all the donors and funders that support us. But it's kind of like that's what I really want to start doing. And I was just noting, like Rhonda, where your Earth Gives, you know, we had this, I think we got through Water Foundation, this Rosalia. And it seems like, I don't know, it's hard to gauge, you know, like, I mean, we could probably do like Rhonda's Earth Gives and then do the Rosalia, but I just don't know, like, how many of those do you need, or what do you think about those? I'm nothing against you. I think Earth Gives would be great, and any of them are good, but it's kind of like for fundraising. Do you think we should go with one of those, or should we just do it ourselves, or?
You absolutely should not use your own platform for a giving day or crowdfunding. It's an illusion of control. I can guarantee you that anything you spend on a platform is going to be well worth your time and effort. Every minute that you're running, you know, the platform or rigging it or updating the website, you're not talking to big givers. So we're not adopting tools and technology at a high enough rate. I wrote a blog recently where I called fundraising a 90s theme party. So I'm like arguing with people about texting and the use of AI in terms of personalization, where everybody just literally finishes talking to me, goes home, looks at their Netflix Q, which is AI driven, text their kids, right? Like, but in fundraising, we're very slow to adopt this technology. I'd say the number one benefit of looking at platforms is that you are instantly part of a community. And so basically all the platforms, we just watch other platforms and steal each other's features. Let me be honest with you. Okay. So what you're instantly getting is just the feedback from other fundraisers who are saying, well, I want to try this thing. And then we create that as a feature. So the volunteer engagement feature, for example, where volunteers have trackable links. We've learned that if volunteers have trackable links, the competition, which is, by the way, lifestyle based, right? And I need to update this because the competition component has become really big, is really huge. And volunteers are like refreshing the page 50 times a minute to see if the goal's met at the end, right? Like kind of incredible stuff, right? The other thing I would say is because most of the people in this vertical do have very tangible things they can show or activities that are related to your work. Thinking about some celebrity engagement is smart. Now, celebrity means different things. That could certainly be a tribal leader. It could be a celebrity, athlete, et cetera, people we know. And what we call that is parasocial engagement. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that if people can see a famous person or a person they identify with or a person they respect doing a thing, they will then adopt that behavior. Key and Peele have a hilarious skit about a athlete who says you can actually fly, and then the next one he's saying no, you can't actually fly. Apparently I didn't know what the word actually meant. Celebrities sometimes get it wrong, right? And we see people adopting behaviors of celebrities that are not good, but there's a lot of opportunity with that kind of parasocial engagement. I would say really think about, if you're engaging celebrities or notable people, gating that a little bit to the people who have already stepped up. Now again, you could 2 days later go to the broader audience, but if that parasocial engagement becomes part of the VIP status, it'll make the giving and the cause adoption much more sticky.
So,
Anybody else?
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Julie, and I just want to make sure we get to other folks'
Go for it.
questions. And then especially if you missed some of what Brian said, we're going to share the recording of this as well. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Karen.
So Brian, we do pretty well with the lifestyle, just, inherent to who our donors are. We have a lot of volunteers. We have a lot of people who are very into hiking. And so it's very much kind of part of their lifestyle. Every, year they give again, they sign up for another volunteer vacation. But when you're targeting, and because everyone has, finite amounts of time to focus on trying to get the, transformation type of donors, would you suggest focusing on the people who seem more engaged or the people who are giving more?
Okay, there's a couple things you can do. So I have written before that moves management is a mirage and that wealth ratings are basically useless. They're mostly useless. You do want to look into your donor base for what evidence you have of capacity. There's a lot of different directions you can go with that. One is, I don't know if any of you do license plates. Boy, if you can get your hands on the make and model of the car, that's huge prospect research, right? You can certainly purchase wealth ratings to say, okay, who in our donor base looks like they may have the ability to distribute wealth. Just be really careful with it, because there's be $73 trillion moving between generations in the next 25 years. A lot of it is intergenerational wealth, and it's not going to necessarily come up under the person who's engaged with you. So look for capacity. One of the simplest things you can do is actually just zip code modeling. You can use census data to say, well, this is the average income in various zip codes. And I've done this with charities before, and we just kind of grade the donor base by 4 zip code buckets. If you're not seeing particularly higher average gifts for people who look like they're in higher income zip codes, you probably are under asking. Right. So there's ways to facilitate your appeals to kind of see if you can get people to ramp up. I would say the other thing is that volunteer engagement, your volunteers who know something. Oh, this person just sold their company. Boy, they're really into it. They just gave to this other charity. I think there's your pastor. Listen to your volunteers more. Right. I think the other component is just ask the donors. So we have been under the illusion that everything requires a fundraiser, and almost nothing about giving actually requires a fundraiser. So they teach us advancement resources is a great training outfit. It's not about us. Now, You got to be in the room. You got to make the ask. If you don't ask, you're not going to get money. That adage still holds. But for the most part, you can actually survey donors. So we've been doing, and I just gave a webinar an hour ago about non-anonymous survey. So private, we're not going to share your results with anyone. We're not going to track back your results in a weird or creepy way, but actually asking donors, would you consider us in your will, or have you considered us in your will? And what we found is when we ask that question as part of an engagement, whether it's a phone call or an event or even just a fundraising appeal, about a third of people who are engaged respond back that they actually are thinking about putting you in their will. That's important to hear back from donors and to follow up with them, because if you speak to the donor about an estate commitment before they pass, you will receive on average 3 times the amount. So surprise estate gifts are 1/3 the amount on average of pre-established ones. That's because building a relationship, you give people the opportunity to be recognized, things like that. Russell James, by the way, to invoke him again, has proven that if you get an estate commitment, you're not going to get any less in terms of annual giving. In the first 3-4 months, you might not get a response to your annual giving appeals, but it is absolutely not the case that if you book an estate gift, on average, you will stop receiving annual gifts. The individual who tells you, I put you in the will, I'm done giving annually, actually was just done giving annually anyway. And it's good that you got the will, the stuff in the will. But actually what we find is that individuals who make big commitments tend to give more annually after the big commitment. Now, about 6 to 18 months after the big commitment, the results are mixed, but after about 18 months, on average, people ramp up. And it's because they're deeply tied to the cause they've made, so I would say reach out to donors and ask. A simple survey to a group of donors saying, would you like to meet with one of us to talk about a bigger gift? Doesn't hurt their feelings. The fact that you ask the question indicates that you are doing major fundraising and that there are other opportunities. So even the people who say no now know that it's an issue, and you'll get a couple meetings. I'd say the hardest thing in fundraising right now is to get a meeting with a major donor. Fundraisers do not tell us that they struggle to ask for money. They do not tell us that they struggle to negotiate for higher amounts of money. They tell us that their biggest struggle is getting appointments. So, and we're just not doing enough listening to donors and volunteers to build that pipeline. I want to share an example. Is anybody from the Urban Ecology Center here?
I don't think they ended up showing up.
So this is perfect, right? So this is their news from Naturehood. Really, really smart. See how you're connecting people in cities to nature and each other, get that social side of things. You support. This is exactly the way to do it. Here we go. Share why you're donating or make a gift in honor or memory of someone. This is huge here in terms of picking up future major gift stuff, right? So it's not just in honor, but it's why are you donating? What are your comments? Everyone should have an open field like that. Making sure that you know that it's optional, but everybody should have that open field. These are a gold mine for future major gifts. These are, I think, the questions that I would say focusing on with those 4 levels. Ask this question: can we make this easier? Is there a way to get a click out of the form? For the transactional donors, again, maybe a different giving form for first-time givers than you're sending people to with your appeals. If you're doing direct mail, I personally don't believe in sending fundraising direct mail in envelopes. I get in this fight all the time. I'm big on postcards with QR codes because ultimately people are going to give online. The vast majority of people are going to make their gift online anyway. So we ought to just send them a postcard with a great picture. It's cheaper, right? With a QR code. QR codes are back. We thought they were going to go away, but then, the global pandemic happened. We'll do our menus that way and things like that, right? That social component. Yeah.
Ryan, one of the things that I understand about environmental giving is that it tends to skew older. And do you think that older donors are going to be using QR codes, or, tell me what you think about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So our biggest use of technology is with people over 60. So we send a lot of texts in my company to young people, but our response rates to this stuff is very high amongst older people. So that tablet, there was a point a couple of years ago where in a single year, the number of minutes spent using a tablet for people over 65 quadrupled in 1 year, right? So there are really not systemic technological barriers to older donors giving. Okay. And I will agree with you that most accounted for environmental donors skew a little older, but to suggest that young people are not actively engaged in this movement or aren't directing their resources is dead wrong. Now, they're tending to give in different ways. They're tending to take action. They are often giving in areas that we think are, not traditional charity. So one of the best arguments I get into is when a fundraiser complains to me about GoFundMe. I think that's a dead way to wrong way to look at it. Say, well, I'm losing gifts to these GoFundMes. I think you should be saying, what is it about that GoFundMe that I can adopt and make my fundraising more like? And that is often that parasocial celebrity engagement. It is often the lowering of friction to make it easier to give. It's often a little bit of an edgier message, right? So I would say that. Think about the VIP experience. Like, how can we, when somebody reaches a certain level of loyalty, give them a slightly different experience that's different than the average donor, because that's going to make the behavior more sticky. And then that key question of how do we get into the pipeline people who can transform? What I want. Go ahead.
David had a question. If there is an endowment, does the same solicitation strategy apply as with an estate bequest?
Okay, David, I need you to ask. I need to clarify. You're saying, do you ask for someone to do an endowment in the same way that you ask them to do an estate? Is that what you're saying?
We have an endowment that people can contribute into as a pooled income fund.
Yes.
So
okay.
How do you ask them?
Okay. The primary way that you ask them is to ask them, how would you like to give? And then be very quiet. So you're listening for, is this an individual who might be interested in an annuity, so lifetime income where the balloon, final payment, the corpus goes to the charity. There are people who are motivated by that stuff. I would say be very careful segmenting it to just those two options. You want to provide for other options, and then also think about alternative giving vehicles, which are really not an alternative anymore. Donor advised funds have grown massively. And I hope that you are all accepting donor advised fund gifts and also linking that back to the donor that directed the fund. Donors very much see their donor advised fund giving as being from them, even though of course it's Fidelity or whoever who is sending the check, and you actually, I think Fidelity tells you we don't want a receipt, but obviously the accounting is through, but make sure you've got that associated person. On endowments versus estate, I would say that you're really starting to think about how is the donor talking about their support. So if it's an action focused donor who's saying, I want to know what the next project is, how can I help? That's probably a current use or project based donor. If the individual is saying, I want to make sure that your organization is here forever, that might be somebody who might be better to approach for the endowment. I would say, generally speaking, endowment gifts are going to be more interesting to older donors. And then on the legacy giving, we often shoot too old for our legacy giving. So the average individual who makes an estate plan with giving does it at the age of 42. Most of our systems are geared to contact people 55, 60 or older. So we should, generally speaking, Gen X is wildly underengaged with the idea of estate giving. Okay, I was just reading a story. For those of you who didn't know, Harry Belafonte died earlier this week. What many people don't know is he actually maintained a policy on Martin Luther King Jr. with Coretta as the beneficiary because MLK said that he couldn't afford it, right? And he did that at a very young age because he wanted. I think Harry knew what was going to happen, right? And that life insurance policy obviously ended up unfortunately being fairly important to the family. So we have some illusions about that sort of stuff. I would say on the endowment based giving, there is something that we call the dark side of endowment growth. And when organizations announce very, very high fundraising totals, and the Ivy League in higher education is a prime example right now, it is very difficult to justify their annual funds. because these are organizations that have over $1 million per enrolled student. They really shouldn't be doing annual fundraising. They hate when I say this, but for the most part, so you want to be careful with some of that endowment stuff, because locking people into a permanent, even though your spending rate is 4 or 5%, they could think that the illusion is, oh my God, you just got $3 million. Well, on average, that's $150,000 in revenue. It's not chump change, and it will be there forever. But I would say, generally speaking, particularly younger donors are more interested in immediate impact giving right now. All right, I want to leave you with one key point here. This is the way that we have done fundraising for years. We would say things like, well, surely this person, went on our hike or went to our school, or, knows the value of Salvation Army. So surely they must give. After they start giving, we're going to build a relationship with them. And when they really step it up, you can tell I'm being a little funny here. We're going to put them in the network, and we're going to let them meet some big wigs. And then, we'll be sure to share with them the impact of their giving. All right, this is the old way. When we look at the cause adoption and philanthropic development of young people in particular, it's basically reversed. Young people want to see impact from their giving. They want to know what impact it's going to have, and that's why all these GoFundMe's go crazy. They want to give socially through a network of people that makes it more sticky. And after that happens, they will then build a relationship with a cause or charity, and over time become loyal. So make sure you're really focusing your efforts in this order. It's absolutely crucial, because the people who are doing it the old way are losing donors. And that's why we have a generosity crisis. So I just wanted to leave with that key point. Again, happy to follow up with anybody, answer questions, look at your appeals, things like that. And Rhonda, I'll let you do your news if there's no more questions, but be happy to talk with anybody after this. Just connect with me on LinkedIn and we can chat.
Wow. Thanks, Brian. That was fantastic. I always learn so much every time you talk. So really appreciate you coming to share your wisdom with everyone here. To reinforce one of the things that you talked about, and I had never really heard about this, the parasocial energy. So I think my news announcement, my breaking news announcement, is a parasocial activity. But let me kind of frame it for everybody here who knows a little bit about Earth Gives, and several of you have participated in our really tiny startup years, and we're really working the scale. Is that the reason why we are here is to boost your missions. We're here to bring attention and engagement to the nonprofits who are already doing the work. And so many times, whether it's crises or people in need, it's the 501c3s that often come to the rescue. And so, inspired by a young climate activist, led me to sort of shape Earth Gives and Earth Gives Day. I had already helped build Arizona Gives Day, and because of that in my past, it was, the idea was, or the seed of it was planted. So one of the things that we obviously have to work on is a little bit of carrot and stick, and that is, how do we market in a national way, in a big way? And we do have a national marketing firm that I believe is going to be taking us on pro bono to do the work. But even last year, somebody randomly from our very small social media presence gave a $20,000 gift to a nonprofit. And I didn't want to take credit for it at all. So I checked with that nonprofit and I said, did you tee this up? And they said, no, we had no idea this was coming. So there is opportunity, and there is opportunity to gamify this platform. So in part of that carrot, stick, chicken, egg sort of play is, it's my job to go out there and invite organizations of influence to participate in the Giving Day, because it will drive attention. And one of our marketing initiatives is going to be around early giving, marketing themes for 3 weeks in the week of Earth Gives Day, to really bring attention to nonprofits doing the work, offering knowledge and sort of useful action-based ideas for the public to come and learn from, coupled with the sponsor. And I will say, I made an ask this morning, and 10 minutes later, I got a yes. And the yes is from Bill McKibben, the father and huge influencer as it relates to climate action. And so the reason why I went there is not to divert attention, but in fact to bring attention to what you all are doing, and hopefully the other participants in Earth Gives Day when we open up registration sometime in early June is my hope, and people can start signing up to participate and join us for yet again another effort to catalyze investment in the work that you all are doing, which is so appreciated and necessary for all of us. So you heard it first. Bill McKibben. Are there any other, oh, thanks, Karen. Are there any other questions, thoughts, last words from anyone?
I have a question.
Sure. Natalie?
Something that Sustainable Seattle that we're kind of trying to grapple with is we've had an uptick in our social media presence in terms of followers. Do you have any kind of like tips or advice for turning those followers into donors? We've noticed through our giving campaigns that even though we're posting a lot on social media, we're not really getting that return of investment of spending a lot of time on digital fundraising, but those followers haven't quite yet turned into donors. And that's something that we're really trying to do this year.
Okay. With the exception of rage-based giving or really, really quick emotional response giving, a fire, shooting, unfortunately, social media-based fundraising is a myth. The effective number of people who will give because of your social media campaigns with the links you post in social media is often zero. Okay. Having said that, in every case where I have linked a social media campaign to an appeal that is out there in the world, whether it's electronic, direct mail, email, the social media recipients, so a lot of times we test A/B test, give at a higher rate. So social media outside of a flood, I'm sure you can all think of examples, is largely going to be a boost to your other efforts. So here's what you do. Social media campaigns are great ways to announce a match-based gift. If it can be from a notable individual that people know, either in your community or as a celebrity. So $50,000 for $50,000, one-to-one, things like that. And social media can be very effective in terms of gamification. So one of the Land Rover award winners this past year was this bear charity. I don't know if you guys saw this, but they have like live cameras for the bears. So they're often in a position to rescue bear cubs when the mother, frankly, has been shot by a hunter. And they have these bear cams. And if you gave, you got access to the bear cam. And it was kind of cool. Pretty hilarious because they put a brown blanket in the enclosure. And everybody thought that bear was dead. So it blew up on social media saying the bear's not moving. They actually did this hilarious social media response where they had like arrows and it said blanket, straw, actual bear, like little arrows, right? It's pretty hilarious. So that stuff can be very effective. But for the most part, you want to look at social media either as a boost to your existing appeals. So you do your social media push while you have the appeals out there, or the announcement of a social gamified, match-based, challenge-based gift. And then absolutely crucial for social media givers, that link that people click on, that QR code, all the directions you go with that has to have a very, very low friction giving option associated with it, to the point that you might give up some of the data in exchange for making it easier. So what I mean by that is you might have fewer fields for people to fill out, may even be at a base level of just collecting their email address and the information you need to actually process the gift, and then following up with them to update their information and tell you more about themselves, just making it as easy as possible to give. So that's the direction that I would go with a social media Number one, boost your existing peels. Number two, challenges, matches, gamification. Number three, just make it so easy to give via a social media link.
Natalie?
Not
Yeah.
just sustainable Seattle, because we've seen our followers grow, but the donations haven't correlated yet. So it's a little affirming just to know that it's not just us.
Yeah, social media giving is a myth. So the other thing too is when you have that push for that challenge or match, and hopefully you'd have a page or a platform that tracks that, right? Encourage your volunteers not to just social media post, but to social media post in a very defined time frame. So what a lot of people don't know is that the algorithms on social media are really juiced by immediacy and compression of posting. And that's because the algorithm is looking at it and saying, well, this group of people that are socially connected because they're friends with each other, or they post on the same things, or the algorithm is telling me that they're like each other, are all doing this thing. I'm going to kick that up in the feed. So probably the biggest mistake that people make on social media is they say, okay, everybody post today. No, everybody post at 12:30. So I basically see 5 to 10 times the response to things like that I market if I get my team, even if it's a smaller number of them, to just post all within an hour. And LinkedIn, by the way, is massively juiced by this, because LinkedIn is just the constant stuff. You'll really rise up in people's feeds if there's a temporal component to your volunteer posting strategy and liking and resharing.
Yeah, and doesn't the research also say that Thursdays are the biggest days for making gifts? And it's kind of the reason why we chose Earth Gives Day to be on a Thursday.
So,
you know? And like randomly, like at 11:30 in the day, it's just such a weird.
Yeah. So Thursdays, December and June are the top times for fundraising. I can report to you, however, that the reason why they are the top time for fundraising is that's when people ask. I would not do a giving day on a Monday, because you want to have your Monday to test the platform and be ready and do your soft start. If I was going to do a giving day, I would do Tuesday or Wednesday. And that's because then you still have the remainder of the time, the rest of the week, to talk about results and impact. I think Thursday's fine if you have, especially if you have the infrastructure in place to share the results on Friday. But you're not going to get anything out of people after noon on Friday. It ain't going to happen. We have a wide diversity of people who give to causes. For the most part, people who are able to contribute substantially to causes have fairly reliable Monday to Friday. So it's just true the way things have gone in terms of income disparity. Now they may be traveling for work on the weekends and things like that, but most people still have a Monday through Friday cycle. So for the most part, the research on when people give is a huge selection bias, because that's when we're asking. So there's no reason why, for example, higher education donors like June. The only reason why they all give in June is because we bug them in June. And every time we've tried to move appeals to March, April, we do great.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Really appreciate you joining us for the Community Commons Impact Makers for April. We look forward to seeing you over the coming months, and potentially and hopefully have you join us for Earth Gives Day if that serves your needs. Thanks so much again, Brian. You were fantastic. Really appreciate you sharing your insight with all of us.
Do Earth Gives Day. Investing in a giving day and manufacturing urgency is probably the biggest thing we can all do to grow our donor pool right now. Just absolutely do it.
And as a community, that's what we're really after, to build a community of Earth givers who come together with dollars and all the rest, and yeah. So thanks everybody.